Conservative thought. Not just talk.
This is the Dan O'Donnell Show.
What exactly is going on in the Republican caucus with respect to the impeachment circus? Is it true that some Republican senators might actually be willing to vote to convict? It's weird that these stories come out before even Democrats admit we've seen all of the evidence, but the stories do come out like this. But this isn't pure politics. This is about getting to the truth, right? Joining me now, Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson. Sir, thanks so much for taking the time. Do appreciate it.
Morning, Dan. How you doing?
Well, to quote the very famous character Mugatu, played by Will Ferrell in the classic film Zoolander, I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. I feel like I am the last sane human being on earth who looks at the transcript of the call, looks at the whistleblower complaint, and doesn't see a single thing that could even be considered extortion or bribery or anything that Democrats and their allies in the media have spent the past week plus alleging.
Well, you should be me, surrounded by a gaggle of reporters answering questions for 10 to 15 minutes, where they have put the worst possible construction on every element, every word within these transcripts. And it's like, am I in an alternate universe here? I mean, what am I not seeing here? It is crazy.
In your estimation, since this essentially does rest on the interpretation of what President Trump was really saying to Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukrainian prime minister or president, on that call on July 25th, is a reasonable interpretation that he was saying, hey, corruption is a big problem in the Ukrainian government. The Poroshenko regime was not helping out and rooting this out. We need to be better allies with Ukraine, and part of that is rooting out elements of corruption within the government that remain from the Poroshenko regime. Is that not a reasonable interpretation of what he was talking about?
Well, Dan, I'm not sure if you understand how much firsthand knowledge I have of this particular instance, because I actually went to Ukraine in the first week of September. I'm the one that called up President Trump a few days before that, really trying to convince him to release the funding. I heard his explanation of why he was concerned. It's been incredibly consistent, really from the day he entered office. He's upset that Europe doesn't step up the plate, that Angela Merkel doesn't commit more funds to help Ukraine and NATO. I mean, it's their backyard, not ours. And the fact that he obviously was concerned about corruption, and quite honestly, a little upset that there are plenty of stories that some of this Russian collusion narrative sprang out of some of the corruption, some of the activities in Ukraine. So, again, I actually know why the president did this, I believe, because he's told me directly. I had a meeting with Zelensky, with Senator Murphy. He was obviously concerned about the funding, but in no way, shape, or form expressed any concern that any kind of pressure is being put on him. So I look at that letter, having spoken with President Trump on the phone, in person, it's the way he talks. It was a very gracious letter. I didn't see anything untoward about it, but I see how it's being twisted. And it's again, as you say, it's crazy town. It's like an alternate universe.
What specifically did President Trump say to you?
When I was pressing him, I wanted to be able to go to Ukraine in 4 or 5 days and say, President Zelensky, I talked to the president, he's going to release the funding. He didn't give me that go-ahead. He told me, Ron, the place is corrupt. Do you understand? So he kind of went through a number of, kind of a litany. That's the way President Trump talks, a little bit like me in staccato, very shorthand, but all these areas of corruption. It said, plus, Ron, we're schmucks. I talked to Angela Merkel. I said, why don't you guys fund these things? And you go, well, because you will. We're schmucks, Ron, So in the end, he said, okay, listen, I got to go take care of a hurricane, but you'll probably like my decision on this thing. And that's how the call ended. So I didn't get the clearance to go tell Zelensky that the funds were going. So I told Zelensky exactly what the president told me, his rationale why he was considering this. But here's also a key point, and this is the point I made to Zelensky. Let's not allow this moment to. It's a timing issue. We're
Sure.
at the end of the fiscal year. It makes a lot of sense. This money hasn't been spent. Why not? Why should we spend it into a corrupt system when Germany ought to be, and our European allies ought to do that? But it's a timing issue. Let's not allow this to blow up where Vladimir Putin can take a look at this and say, oh, look, America's support for Ukraine is dwindling. It's going away. Nothing could be further from the truth. The Congress, I think the American people's support for the courageous people of Ukraine is trying to rid themselves of this legacy of corruption remains strong. So let's not blow this out of proportion. It's a timing difference. If President Trump decides not to support this funding, Congress will come back backfilled and give the president no flexibility to not fund it. So again, that was my message, and that's exactly how I still believe today.
All right, what did Zelensky say to that? How did he respond?
He primarily said, senators, more important than the funding is just the support, the signal it sends. And we totally got that. And by the way, the only way that Giuliani or any kind of pressure got brought up in that conversation is when Senator Murphy, and he's on the record telling the press exactly what he said, but he said he warned Zelensky, boy, you got strong bipartisan support in Congress right now. Don't involve yourself with Giuliani, with American elections, or you risk that bipartisan support. So Zelensky didn't bring that up. He never expressed any concern that he thought he's being pressured. It was Senator Murphy that kind of tied the two together.
Okay, so Murphy was the one who said, look, he's feeling all sorts of pressure coming from the president. Did Murphy explicitly say any of this? Because it feels almost like with Murphy, and I don't want you talking out of school about one of your Democratic colleagues, but it almost seems like Murphy is giving a different interpretation than the one that you are saying that Zelensky, because right now, after all of this blew up, now, when you were over in Ukraine, you were meeting with Zelensky, nobody was talking about the whistleblower complaint or anything like this. Nobody was even focused on any of this funding. So what was Murphy saying in this meeting? Because he seems to be singing a completely different tune now.
So again, nobody talked about pressure. Okay, nobody talked about pressure that Zelensky was feeling from President Trump, and that may tie into the fact that he's not getting the funding. Nobody talked about that. Nobody talked about a quid pro quo. Nobody talked about any kind of deal. The only thing that Murphy was talking about is he was just warning Zelensky, don't involve yourself with Giuliani. Don't get involved in American politics or you risk losing bipartisan support. That was the point. Again, nothing tying to any kind of threats that supposedly Trump had made. Boy, if you don't turn over this dirt on my political opponent, you're not going to get the funding. That never came up. Nobody, it wasn't on anybody's mind.
I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. I look at this, and I have tried to look at this from both sides, because part of truly understanding something as politically fraught as this impeachment controversy is looking at it from the other side's point of view. I cannot see a reasonable interpretation of a single phone call, which is the context of this is a congratulatory call. Hey, we're going to work together. It's friendly. It's cordial. There doesn't seem to be, there's no mention of this aid, Senator, that's brought up at any point in this phone call. And there are 540 words between the phrase, I need you to do us a favor, and any mention of Joe Biden. Biden, it seems, the investigation into Hunter Biden is an afterthought that's thrown in because it seems that Biden was going around bragging about, he's on tape bragging about how he was able to leverage $1 billion in loan guarantees for Ukraine firing a prosecutor that was investigating his son's company. I don't see how this gets warped into investigate Biden or you're not getting your money.
Well, again, what news media personalities and some Democrats are using the analogy of a mafia don. So, they don't threaten you directly. It's just, I made you an offer you can't refuse. something that's again, it's manufactured. Quid pro quo. It's a manufactured threat that Trump was apparently holding over Zelensky's head, but Zelensky never expressed that to me, and we had a completely open and honest discussion about this. Now, I was very open in terms of, the president's viewpoint that, he thinks, part of this Russian narrative probably sprang out of this corrupt society in Ukraine, and that's a raw nerve with him, and that kind of feeds into his concern about corruption in Ukraine. It was a very open conversation. Zelensky, if he felt pressured at all, could have easily brought that up. Okay, but he didn't because he never felt it because there was no pressure put on him, from my viewpoint.
He is Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson. Sir, thank you so much for being so generous with your time. Really do appreciate it.
Have a great day.
You too, sir, and keep singing from the heavens. This is a senator with firsthand knowledge of the inner workings of what was going on with this aid to Ukraine. Nobody was talking about pressure. Nobody was talking about anything. Zelensky did not feel pressure. This is just, it's not surprising. That's what it is.